Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the first RSE talks, and we hope for this to be the first in a series of talks. But as a first session, we wanted to talk to you about the RSE Australia-New Zealand strategy that we have developed over time, and we were led in this effort by Rowland, who will be presenting with me, and of course the steering committee of the Australia-New Zealand RSE community that came together to put together the strategy. All right, so before we get started, we would like to acknowledge Maori as Tangata Whenua and Treaty of Waitangi partners in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We pay our respects to the mana whenua of the land on which we live today. And on behalf of Australia, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri and Boon Wurrung people on whose unceded land some of us live and work here in Naarm, Melbourne. We respectfully acknowledge their elders past and present. We also acknowledge all traditional owners of the country throughout the continents of Australia and Aotearoa. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. So we're here today as the Research Software Engineers community. And before we get started and dive deep into the strategy, it's important we all appreciate how much this community has grown and matured over the last 5 years. So when the steering committee came together, this was around the end of 2018, about 2019, I think. And we were a small group of people really passionate about finding researchers or research software engineers who were sort of doing software work in the research space. And as you can see on this plot here, over time, we've seen an incredible growth in the number of people that have started to engage with us and become members of the community in some sense. And so this is a membership of our mailing list, which is a Google group, and we have been maintaining it since 2017. So while we appreciate this growth, this on the right-hand side is a recent picture of a bunch of RSEs where we just had an impromptu meeting at eResearch Australasia in 2022. And it was lovely. We just posted a Slack message and a bunch of us decided, yep, we're going to meet by the water cooler and have a chat. And it was a really fun impromptu meeting. And this just goes to show that this is a community of really enthusiastic, engaged people who are just really happy to see each other, because we are usually locked up in little silos in our organization, and it's really nice to see another one of us. So from there, I'll set some context on why we decided to do a strategy document and what sort of how the growth of the community has driven the work that we have done today. So when the community started off in 2019, I'm so sorry. I hope you can't hear my dog. Anyway, so when the community started off in 2019, we decided on a few goals that were quite appropriate for the time in which we started. So this was where people were still coming out of the woodwork, and we were still trying to see if people would identify themselves as research software engineers, whether this term that we've coined would mean anything. And so this was off the back of the RSE term that was coined by the UK. And we actually decided, yep, we want to be able to maintain an active, diverse, and sustainable RSE community, which was actually our primary concern. We were just doing outreach, spreading awareness, and getting people together. And we wanted to define what an RSE looked like in various different contexts, whether it's in academia, whether a professional role, or in e-research. We wanted to form connections between communities because we were still finding our tribe, and form a connection and obtain recognition for the role. So these were some of the very high-level goals that we came up with when the steering committee first got together in 2019. Out of those goals, we then listed a bunch of deliverables. And I won't go through all of it, but I'll give you an example. So one of the deliverables was, say, define personas, profiles, and personal stories. And this was once again to raise that awareness of RSEs. And a lot of these goals and deliverables we still continue to keep and have because they do add value to what we're doing and have worked in the past to grow and sustain our community. But some of these deliverables, as you'll see, were quite high level, and they were big pieces of work that needed to be broken down further and lacked a bit of clarity as to what was coming out of what the end result of that deliverable would be. So once we identified some gaps, the first thing we had to do is acknowledge we had resource constraints, right? So we had a bunch of volunteers who were on a steering committee who were doing this out of sheer passion for this community and for this new emerging type of work. And so we did have no money, no people. So then we had to talk about prioritization. While these goals sounded wonderful and these deliverables are something we wanted to achieve, we had to find a way to prioritize them to be able to use our minimal resources in a sensible way. And we wanted to have more clarity on the deliverables linked to these individual goals. So we mentioned some high-level goals and we had high-level deliverables, which was very appropriate because we were a nascent community still trying to grow for that time. But we have matured to a stage where we feel like the deliverables need to somehow link into the goals and require a bit more clarity. And lastly, breaking down, like I said, high-level deliverables into more achievable goals. Sorry, action items. So we have just published the strategy document. You will find it on Figshare, and I encourage you to go and have a look at it now. I hope someone can share it. Yep, wonderful, thank you. So it's shared in the chat, so I encourage you to go in there and have a look. Most of this presentation is using the material highlighted in that strategy document. So feel free to scroll through that while I talk as well. Okay. And I'm going to pass it to Rowland, who led us through the process of creating the strategy.
Thanks, Nooriyah. So I think one of the things that we were trying to do as an overall process was to use the steering committee as a starting point for working through how we would sort of narrow down some of the things that we could think about. And then, so we started with pulling a lot of people together, having a bit of a brainstorm, pulling these things into an online whiteboard, and just doing a lot of back and forth just to narrow down some of the ideas that we've been talking about for quite a long time and what the community was giving us. And as part of the RSE Asia Australia conference, that was actually a catalyst to make sure that the steering committee could agree to a very first draft set of selection criteria that I'll talk about a little bit later, to be shared with the community at the unconference. So when we did catch up at the conference, we included the spreadsheet with all the ideas that we had and how it was prioritized based off the selection criteria. And we got some feedback from the community then. So based on that, we decided to pull that all together and do more back and forth with the steering committee based on the feedback we got from the conference. And that's what we have at the moment. And I guess the last part of this process is a final opportunity for the community to provide feedback. With most strategies, there's sort of nothing's ever set in stone. So anytime we want to provide feedback, people want to provide feedback, we may update the strategy as well. Nooriyah, could we jump back one? Or because I wanted to show this first. So one of the things that I've introduced recently into my strategic planning is having selection criteria. And these are basically more practical ways of writing what other people might call principles. So there's a school of thought that, you know, for a strategy, if you provide your principles, then it helps you narrow down what you want to do. And what I've done is use this idea of strategic selection criteria to help make things a little bit more practical for people who might be looking at the strategy, but from a what can I do? So based on multiple meetings, the 5 selection criteria that we ended up with was, does this make RSEs value themselves? Does this make decision makers, i.e. people with money or power, value RSEs? Does this grow or sustain the RSE community? Which is actually quite a big thing. And does this or can this support diversity, equity, and inclusion areas? And finally, does this raise awareness of RSE or contributes to advocacy of RSEs in a non-extractive way? There have been sort of discussions where you may have seen someone has asked you for information about something, you might provide that information as a survey or as an interview, and then you might not see that again, or that might not impact you directly. And that is one possibly bad example of an extractive way of doing things. You're providing feedback for someone else to be able to do to get benefit from it. So when we have these selection criteria, it allows us to be able to look at some of the different opportunities to be able to say, right, you know, where does this fit? So if you go to the next slide, Nooriyah, these are the lists of the goals that weren't prioritized. Oh, this is how we did the priority, but it also shows some of the things on the right here, where the ones at the top would actually say, you know, do we have the scaling value was 2 for a yes, 0 for a no, 1 for a maybe. And we would say for the first one, you know, does this statement, vision, or goal, RSE 001, does it fit through that criteria? And that particular one, you can't see it very well, but the answer was yes, we could justify it based on that selection criteria. So obviously that went up to the top of the list. And so we basically just went through and tried to prioritize things and say, well, you know what, it's getting to a point where maybe four of these would be enough for us to go by. We need to sort of limit ourselves. And that's how we went through that process. So again, what I want to point out is that individuals could still work on RS activities that are in the list, but haven't been prioritized. It's just that the steering committee wouldn't be able to provide oversight in the way that we're trying to do for the other ones. And we might need to find ways of being able to support those other projects as well. So back to you, Nooriyah. Did you want to, I was just going to ask a question for everyone. Did you want people to provide questions in the chat, or did you want to do it through another method, or wait till the end and answer all the questions in the chat?
Yeah, so I'm going to do some live polling using Slido, but so there is a Q&A section in there for the Slido that I've created. I'm actually okay with people popping things in this Zoom chat as well. So I'll try and keep an eye on both, but I'll probably need help from you, Rowland or Nisha.
I'll check the Zoom chat. I'll keep an eye out for the Zoom chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Awesome. So now that Rowland's told us all about how we went about finalizing the 4 goals that the steering committee will focus on, I will tell you about those goals. So this is the Slido that I have just set up. If feel free to go in and enter that code, or I can copy the link and pop it. Oh, someone's already done it. Thank you. Okay. Cool. You probably won't see anything right now, but awesome. So let's look at the first goal. The first one that sort of went through the selection criteria and came out at the top for us was, of course, bringing the community together. So as a community, we started the NZ, the New Zealand RSE conference in 2020, and which has been, I guess, which has been successful because we have had a great deal of engagement, and we've actually had really good feedback come out of the event as well by people who said they value the opportunity to meet other community members and interact with them. But RSE Australia and Asia Unconference that was held last year was equally successful, and they were able to gain a great deal of engagement from the Australian and Asian community, and I believe a lot of the New Zealand community joined in as well. And so they both have slightly different formats in the way in which they're run. So the NZRSC seems to be more of a presentation style, whereas the Asia Australia Unconference seemed to be a more discussion focused event, which could change over time. And we're going to tailor it to whatever suits the situation at that point. But these two were our primary events that we have for the community in the year. And so I am now looking at the key results. Based on the selection criteria, we came up with these 4 key results for this goal that we would like to focus on in 2023 to 2025 is, of course, continue to organize these 2 RSE conferences in New Zealand and Australia and keep providing that base for the community. We then want to raise awareness of the RSE community and its activities at least one other major event. So as a committee, when we first came together, we tried to look at every event like eResearch Australasia, eResearch New Zealand, and other conferences where we could have a research software engineers birds of a feather session or a talk just to spread awareness and bring the community members together at those events. But we have matured to a stage where we now have our own events, but we still do want to continue to raise awareness at those really key events that we know that RSEs are usually attending. The third is organizing monthly tech talks that incorporate face-to-face meetings. Ta-da! So we did it. This is the first one here. And so we want to continue to do this, and hope we want to do it on a monthly basis. Yeah, it's going to be best efforts to do it on a monthly basis. And some of them might include a face-to-face component where we might do an in-person meetup after or something, but I don't know what that looks like yet. And the last one under this goal is to build a coordinator network, especially in smaller states and regional areas, to increase engagement and support in those areas. So, as part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion criteria, it was really important to us that we reach out of the metropolitan areas and the big universities, and also look at other regions that where RSEs might be working but not have the support to engage as much as those in the bigger organizations or institutions. And so we're going to be able to do that through a network of people who are located in those areas and by supporting those people to then have community gatherings or any such thing in those specific regions. So that's goal 1. Rowland, did you want to add anything before I go to Slido, or should I just?
No, that's all good.
Okay, so let's do this. I hope you can see the Slido. Okay, so what we would love to know is, I've just made the slide, so if you refresh your Slido screen, you will be able to see the question: how impactful would this goal be for you as a member of the community? Yes, exactly what we want to see. Exactly what we want to see. Oh, that's wonderful. Someone's changing their mind. Okay. And moving on to the next one, while people are still changing their mind. What are your thoughts on goal 1, where we're focusing on bringing the community together through the key results that I mentioned? And this could be anything. It could be a couple of words of, yep, very useful, looking forward to it, don't like it. You could spend your time doing other things, just whatever you feel. Useful, yes, definitely want it to be useful.
That was totally a suggestion.
Yeah. Thanks, Melody. And feel free to unmute and make comments if that's how you'd like to engage. Doesn't have to be Slido. Oh, wonderful. Knowledge sharing. Yep, that's a key aspect of our conferences. Catch up for lunch. Lunch is always great. We hope to do some face-to-face meetups at the back end of these tech talks. And so if we're able to get that going, we'll definitely do a lunch or something. Communication channel, networking, yep. Awesome. Thank you. That's really nice to see. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so moving forward to the next goal that we've landed on. And the next one for us is raising the profile of RSEs. So this community has always been about, number one, identifying people who use software in research or do any kind of work with software in research. But it's also been about recognizing their value and contributions. And so that's, as part of the selection criteria, it was pretty obvious that raising profile of RSEs would bubble up to the top of the list. So profiles and personal stories have been used in other RSE associations. They help for RSEs to kind of see themselves in these stories that are being told, because of the nature of the role. RSEs tend to do a variety of different things within research, and there is no set remit under which an RSE usually operates. And so because of that scale and variety, we had to be able to find a way for people to connect with the term research software engineers. And one way to do that was to make it more people-centric and showcase people who are doing different types of work within this space. So some of the key results that came out of that we have identified under this goal is to define at least 5 personas, profiles, or personal stories of people that form the RSE community. We want to try and highlight the work of at least 4 RSEs via Tech Talks. So hopefully in the following Tech Talks, we will see some really interesting talks by research software engineers who are doing amazing, valuable work in research. And of course, market personas and Tech Talks to raise awareness of this contribution that RSEs are making to research. This over time will also help us to build an evidence-based advocate for the value that RSEs are providing to research. And so it's a short-term gain, but it's also a longer-term gain to be able to do this. All right, and we're going to go back to Slido. I'm not sure this format is working, but okay, so how impactful do you think it'll be for you if we raise the profile of RSEs? There's stuff happening in the chat. Yes, Paula has done, Paula, who's also on the steering committee, has done an incredible job with creating these RSE stories, and she has populated some examples in the Zoom chat. So please feel free to go have a read. All right. Yeah. That's good to know. And of course, tell us what you think about that goal and the key results under it. Do you think this might be useful? Do you think we should do other things? We should do other things, but also. Rowland, did you want to add anything in the meantime about goal 2 while people populate this?
Yeah, I was just saying that we've already started to do some of these things by combining them with other events like the unconference. So sometimes we would make sure that those stories are being heard or raising that awareness by reaching out to, I think it was Associate Professor Asif Khan. We reached out to him to be on the senior panel. And we also reached out to Associate Professor Jess Ma. And it was a way to start a conversation about what is a research software engineer. And they both realized, oh, I didn't realize I was actually could be considered a research software engineer. And I think that's these sort of opportunistic ways of being able to do it would be actually very beneficial to the community.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We've many times we've had conversations with people who didn't think they were RSEs, but then they saw someone else who called themselves an RSE and saw what they did and said, oh, actually, I do something similar. Maybe I am an RSE. Awesome. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to do, demonstrating value and hopefully showcase a diverse range, a diversity of research software engineers. Yep, there's a question in there. How will we use them? Great question. So I think that the idea is first to have those stories and sort of circulate them within communities or within circles where we know that research software engineers would engage. But also over time, as we build on these stories, we are sort of building an evidence base for the value that RSEs are bringing into research. And so hopefully we can then build a case for, having more research software engineers at your institution, or having more permanent roles that are research software engineers, etc. Did you want to add anything? Did anyone from the steering committee want to add anything? Rowland?
I was just Francois made a comment. Paula made a comment that half the people she interviewed didn't realize that didn't consider themselves RSEs, and Francois was talking about, you know, it'd be great to raise awareness to people outside of the RSE community as well. And I think this is the beauty of these stories. They can be leveraged for both inside and outside the community too. Well, that's what I'm hoping anyway.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry if I missed the Zoom chat at times. Yeah, awesome. So let's move on to our third goal, which is to create a diverse and sustainable community. And I think that a lot of these goals, some of them seem to be overlapping, but then we have identified unique key results that fit into each of these goals. And so we have recognized quite early on that as an RSE community, we are looking to get recognition in research. And having gone through that, we want to be able to make sure that while we are advocating for our own recognition, we are also not leaving behind the fact that we need to be able to consider the diversity that exists within the research software engineering community. And so we are striving to do that. And we have also included something along the lines of ensuring we do not burn out members of our community. And that's a really key point, because a lot of the contributions that are coming as part of the steering committee or as people who sort of help out with our bigger conferences, a lot of them are volunteering their time. And so this is outside of the work they do, because they're really passionate about the community and the people. And so definitely want to ensure that we are supporting and enabling them to look after their mental health while growing our community. So we do want it to be a safe and diverse and sustainable space. And so some of the key results that we've recognized in this goal were first to get an idea of the demographics of the current mailing list. And as I showed you earlier, we are at about over 400 people now on that mailing list. And so it would be quite interesting to see who is part of our community. And I don't think we've really sat down and gone through all of the people and the institutions that make up the current mailing list. The other one is, of course, review and report on and to the community about this diversity that exists currently, and some of the gaps that we need to address. Creating specific roles for each goal to attract new volunteers and avoid burnout for existing volunteers. So instead of saying, okay, goal 3 belongs to one person and they're responsible for it, while we know that most times these people are volunteering, we could spread the load and help share the work, and people within the community can sort of come in and volunteer their expertise. And the last is encourage and support community members to build their own projects. I think this also refers to what Rowland mentioned earlier, with a whole bunch of things that we want to do for the community, but there's just not enough resources or time to do that. And if someone within the community would like to kickstart a project in that list, just because it's not in the 4 goals that we're focusing on, it doesn't have to be sidelined. If someone else can take responsibility and run with it, we would like to find ways to support them. All right. And back to Slido we go. So do you think goal 3 would be impactful for you? And while people fill that out, was there anything I missed on that anyone wanted to add? Rowland, did you have any further comments on that one?
Just as a personal note, I think even though the unconference was like really great and fantastic, I think I got burned out from doing that. So I think that'll change this year because we've got that base, that knowledge from last year. But I think it's definitely something we don't want our volunteers to have to go through, if possible. At all.
Yeah.
Remove that if possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. I'm glad people see value in this one. And if anyone wants to raise any thoughts on goal 3, I will have a quick look at the Zoom chat while you do that. Yeah, Georgina just said in the comments that maybe we could provide these profiles to careers teams building the pipeline. Yeah, absolutely. We could definitely do more in terms of outreach for these personal profiles and personas. But it's openly published, and so anyone can share them. Yeah. Keep the community going. Sustainable is key. Yep, absolutely. And so if we are able to strike a balance between who's doing what and the resources that we have, and just making sure everyone's well looked after, I think sustainability might be possible. Yep. Oh, someone said we are quite diverse. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. But we'd love to keep that going and do better in that space for sure. How do we ensure diversity? That's a great question. And I don't think it's one I can answer in a minute, but what I can say is there are many factors that sort of affect diversity. And I know, Rowland, you've done a lot of work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And so, you know, it's just about being, I guess, being more mindful, being conscious of the, how do I say this? Do you want to help me out?
Yeah. So one way to ensure diversity is to center the most marginalized voices who aren't even in the room. And I think, as Nooriyah was saying, I think we've done an okay job with diversity, better than you know, relative equivalent organizations. But there are still ways that we can do more. But it then comes down to sustainability and prioritization and other things too. But the main thing is to center the most marginalized people who aren't even in the room.
Yeah, and what I was trying to get at before was just being aware of your privilege and centering people that you know are not in your position. All right. And I will move swiftly on because I know we might run out of time. So The last one is actually quite a shift from what we previously had. So a lot of the goals that I mentioned, 1 to 3, they overlap with the goals that we had initially agreed on as the steering committee. And so that's great, but we were able to sort of bring in the key results and really narrow down some of the pieces of streams of work that would be done within those goals. But the roadmap to a mature structure, this is something that's become quite important over time. And as the community has grown, we are starting to now see the need for some sort of infrastructure or roadmap to how we can sustain it in the future. And so to mature the community structure, we would need to be a recognized formal entity or organization, or I don't know, whatever the legal word for it is. The UK recently became the Society of RSE, and so that helped them to gain a legal identity, which then helped them to move funds around, to host conferences, gather funds, use that money towards doing things for the community. And so this goal is around starting to think about how we could gain that independence and scale up. So some of the key results that were included, that we've identified within this goal, are first is to start to discover and report on what we actually need to establish as an association, I mean, as a legal entity, and what would be the pros and cons for the community or the steering committee if we decide to go that route. And so another gap that we identified was a lot of us on the steering committee are a lot of us are early career researchers, managers, but we were missing, we had a bit of a gap between having some of the decision makers and senior leaders from the institutions and organizations that we worked at, and having guidance and direction from those key decision makers on the steering committee. And so to be able to do that, we have thought about putting together a senior advisory board that can help mentor and guide the steering committee. And this is a two-way, this would be sort of an advantage for both, right? So we would learn from these decision makers and try to understand how they're thinking and what they're thinking and what we should do to make the most of this of the situation for our community. But also they could help us to advocate in the circles that they engage in. And so that really raises the awareness and advocacy for RSEs overall. And lastly is looking for funding opportunities. And so if we decide to be a legal entity and we want to start, running events and fund people and funding projects, we would like to be able to look for funding opportunities. All right, and my last Slido will be, how would Goal 4 impact you as part of the community? And I think this one was, this is quite a big shift from what we had initially, and it's because of the growth that we've seen within the community. And other associations in the world are now looking to go this route and becoming legal entities. We had started to think about it. Cool, looking positive for the most part. Awesome.
And Nooriyah, just to give an idea, we've had situations in the last couple of weeks where we've had to make decisions to get around some of the obstacles we face because we don't have access to our own bank account and our own financials, and we're relying on the goodwill of other organizations. And that just, we're all volunteers, and it just adds an extra layer of complexity and timeframes. So we expect to be relatively slow, but actually, you know, when we have to go through intermediaries to do something, it becomes more challenging and becomes more complex. So that's what I can see it from as being a steering committee member anyway.
Yeah, I have to agree, but for the most part, my the reason I'm able to do this much is because of the support that I get from Nessie to really engage with this community and to help on the steering committee. Yeah, it definitely seems like there have been many points at which organizational constructs and other things have gotten in the way of a lot of interesting things that we could do, but weren't able to.
And it is a maturation process as well, right? But we're hitting that now when we actually want to build on what we've done with the community. We want the community to connect, but oh, we need to do that. Oh, hang on. Oh, we need to do this, and this actually, and so it becomes more challenging.
Yeah, a more stable organization, absolutely. Yeah, makes it more recognizable. Acceptance and adoption by organization, yeah. And it helps us to then apply for funding. And I think someone's already sort of said in the chat that, you know, US RSE recently got a grant from Sloan, quite a big one. And so there are organizations that want to support local RSE efforts. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. This was really valuable. I'm just very aware of the time. And so I think that's all I had really for the strategy and the goals that we have prioritized as the steering committee. And we really appreciate your time and the feedback that you've given. Actually, this will help us immensely. And so if you want to get involved in any of these streams of work that will now come out of the goals and the key results, please contact us. The email for the steering committee is right here on the screen, and I will do a follow-up email to this TikTok. And so I will put all the details and links for you in that email as well. This session was recorded, so I will be circulating the recording of this presentation as well. We still have open positions on to be on the steering committee and also on the committee of our two major conferences, the NZRC and the RSE Asia Australia. So if you're interested in participating in organizing the conference or planning the program or anything like that, please feel free to get in touch on the steering committee email. I know a lot of you have already contributed and helped out. So thank you so much for that and for your time. What's next? We have a second talk planned already. So that's happening on the 2nd of May, same time, by Dr. Rose Pearson. And she works at NIWA, which is sort of a Crown Research Institute in New Zealand, and is a geologist, and it'll be quite interesting. But obviously she does identify as an RSE as well. And yeah, our website is right here. So if you want to keep updated on the events or all the happenings and find the document about the strategy again, please feel free to go browse the website. And before I close, I know that a lot of the steering committee members are here. So does anyone else have any final words, anything they'd like to share, thoughts? Actually, why don't I just open it up? Does anyone on here have anything they'd like to share? Final thoughts?
Only that with the conference committee, it's broken up into 3 phases. And if you wanted to just work on the planning phase, you could just work on that part. If you want to work on the promotion phase, you could just work on that part. Or if you wanted to be involved at the time the conference is actually implemented, you could work on that part too. So feel free to email the steering committee to get involved.
Yep. That's a great point. Great. And so